A few weeks ago, I looked at the Islanders' top 5 prospects in the system, and my ranking was kinda wonky. There were some problems with it. Well, I've gone back to the drawing board, fixed the problems that we identified last time, and came out with a new top 5 that I think is much better. As always, hit that subscribe button, don't miss a video. Also go to Twitter, follow at TLOMitch, that's me. Don't miss any breaking information about Islanders prospects I've yet to cover on the channel. So you'll remember a couple of weeks ago I did my first top 5, right? And it was kind of wonky. So the top 5 had then Alex Jeffries, Samuel Bolduc, Cameron Berg, Ruslan Iskhakov, and William Sfour. Which is, there's a couple of names in there where you're going, alright, that makes sense. But there are other ones there you're going, that is strange. Right? Alex Jeffries, number 1. What the heck is that going on? Great player, of course, good prospect, but number 1 in the system? If so, the Islanders system is in big trouble. So I went and changed some things, because the problem with that last ranking was it didn't factor in a lot for specific prospects. Right, what I was looking at is draft year -1, draft year, and then draft year +1 through whatever year we are since that player has been drafted. Well, that's not fair for some players, like let's say Anatoly Golishev, who's got like 5 years of data, whereas someone like Alex Jeffries or Cameron Berg has 1 to 0, right? Like Cameron Berg was just drafted, Alex Jeffries was drafted last year, only really played 10 games. The sample size isn't high for either of those players. And so when they have one really strong year, they get catapulted to the top of my rankings. So what I did is I looked at the last 4 years of data for each of the Islanders prospects, and that stabilized things. It really did. I also changed how I associated growth to the ranking. So you'll remember that in that ranking, or in my rankings, I give growth, or I allow for growth to be a more predominant factor in how they rank. But I just kind of averaged out the growth. This time what I did is I weighted their growth based off of where that growth was occurring. So essentially the way what I wanted to do is I didn't think it was fair for someone to, let's say, grow their NHLE, and we'll get to what that is in a bit, by like 20 points at the Mestis level, have the same impact positively in my rankings to someone who had the same type of NHLE growth at, let's say, the SHL level. You know, you got Mestis level, SHL level. The SHL is much higher ranked in terms of quality than the Mestis level. That's not fair. So I weighted the player's growth based off of where that growth occurred. And that also stabilized things a little bit better. So here's my top 5 and top 10 to give you a sense of how things have changed since the last ranking. 1. Robin Salo. Already makes a lot more sense. 2. Samuel Bolduc. Yep, checks out. Ruslan Iskhakov, number 3. Arnaud Durandeau, 4. Colin Adams, 5, and you're going, all right, 4 and 5, weird, but we'll get to why they're there. Mitchell Van Sample, Matthias Rayanemi, number 7, Alex Jeffries, 8, Cameron Berg, 9, Reese Newkirk, 10. So Jeffries and Berg are still there, but much lower in the rankings, so makes a lot more sense. And then you see Salo, Bolduc, Iskhakov, and you're saying, that makes a lot of sense. So again, you'll remember that my top 5 is based not only on growth, but primarily on NHLE. And NHLE is NHL expected. And what that tries to do is say, how many points did that player produce at their level? How does that translate to the NHL level? So for example, if a player puts up 20 points at the SHL level, what does that mean, or what could that translate to at the NHL level? Is that a 15-point player? Is that more? What does that mean at an NHL clip? So, looking at that and adding growth to it, but just looking at NHLE, here's how the top 5 look over the last 4 years. Again, the last 4 years. So 2021, 19-20, 18-19, 17-18. And you can see the top 5 have a consistent theme, which makes sense. They're growing. Look at that NHLE. None of them are falling. They're all going up. Robin Salo specifically just doesn't stop going up, which makes sense as to why he's at the top, right? Just looking at NHLE, great. And then adding the growth factor to it helps him a lot. Like, he's head and shoulders above everyone because of this growth rate. But now let's talk about these guys individually. Robin Salo is number 1, and that makes a lot of sense. Like I said a few times already, this guy is just continuously growing from the Liga level up into the SHL level last year. Absolutely not meteoric rise, but consistent growth at every level. And so when I look at my rankings here, you can see his NHLE goes from 4 to 10 to 16 to 27 last year. So what he did at the SHL level last year essentially translates to a 27-point player today at the NHL level. That's impressive. That is really good. Not blue chip impressive, but still really solid, right? You'll take 27 points from anyone on the blue line. And that's why he's at the top of this list. Does it mean that he should be playing at the NHL level? Maybe. On another team, I'm sure he goes right into the NHL. But for the Islanders, probably not. Of course, they have a need for a left-handed puck-moving defenseman, which is exactly what Robin Salo is. That's his exact game. That's what he does. But he's young, right? He's 23 years old. He's not going to go into the NHL right away, I would expect. But in terms of rankings with the other prospects, there's no question he's number one. The second player in my ranking is Samuel Bolduc. And again, that makes a lot of sense. He had a great 2021 season with the Bridgeport Sound Tigers. You look at his graph here, and it kind of fluctuates at the QMJHL level at a low base and then explodes when he plays at the AHL level, which makes a lot of sense. The Islanders were already high on this kid. And when you look at the NHLE, you're saying like, well, maybe there's not a whole lot there. But then he plays at the AHL level and you go, aha, I see what you're talking about. He really stepped into his own at the AHL level last year. Now, it's only 24 game sample size, but still, he did very well. 14 points from the blue line at the AHL level is really good. There's no reason to doubt why this kid is a number 2 in the Islanders system. You can argue that he's number 1 over Salo because he played at the AHL level, and that's perfectly fine. My rankings aren't supposed to be definitive, lock hard, this is the second, screw you for any dissenting opinion. No, you can say he's number 1 because he's played at the North American level, and I could agree with you. But it's clear that the 1-2 in the Islanders system is Bolduc and Salo. Player number 3 in my ranking is Ruslan Iskhakov. And people who follow me for a while won't really be surprised that I am not surprised he's number 3 on this list. He had a really strong year last year in Finland. You look at his graph here and it kind of stabilizes at one point. That's because he puts a back-to-back 32-game, 21-point years at UConn. And then he goes pro last year with TPS, and it shoots up to where he becomes a 25-point player at the NHL level with 38 points in 54 games with TPS in Finland. He became that dynamic offensive center, and really a two-way center actually when you think about it. He played not only just offense first, but was a good solid two-way guy for TPS. So now that he's gone to Germany, I expect his growth rate to go up. And I really expect him to challenge Robin Salo and Samuel Bolduc as the top prospects in the system at the end of this year. Fourth on the list is Arnaud Durandeau. And you're going to go, well, that's the first weird name here. And yeah, fair enough. Like, that's a name that kind of came out of nowhere. But when you consider how he played at the end of the 2021 season, it's not that surprising. He had a really good showing for the Bridgeport Sound Tigers at the end of the year. Finished the year with 8 points in 14 games at the AHL level. Again, not a really big sample size, but not most of the guys did. And he's got consistent growth over his last 4 years. Right, he went from 7 NHLE to 9 to 12 to 18. That is consistent growth. When you look at his graph, again, consistent growth up. The trend line would show upwards. And that's what you want to see from prospects, is consistent growth, and not only just at the same level, but at various levels. Right, he went from the Q to the AHL and consistent growth. Now, I'm not going to say this is a definitive lock NHL player, but he continues to grow and might become at some point a bottom 6 NHLer. Maybe not. Maybe he caps out at the AHL level. But when it comes to the Islanders system, he's for sure the 4th in the prospect pool. The 5th ranked prospect in the system is center Colin Adams, coming out of the University of North Dakota. And for people who've been following me, maybe this isn't that surprising, right? Yes, maybe you didn't think that he'd get in the top 5, and I didn't think so either, but I didn't think he'd be far out. So to see him in the top 5 is kind of confirmation bias, to say like, yeah, I knew he was good, and I knew he ranked pretty high, but this kind of confirms that what I saw and what we all saw in this player really kind of fits with what we expect from him. Remember, this is a kid who was the #1 center for the #1 program in college hockey at the University of North Dakota. And when you look at the graph, it doesn't necessarily come out of nowhere where he ranks #5, but it's really the last 2 years where he put it on. So you can see year 1, 4.8, and then he goes to 3.4, but then it shoots up in the last 2 years, 12.7, 18.6 in terms of NHLE. And that makes a lot of sense at the college level, specifically in a top-ranked program like UND, where kids coming in playing their junior year and their sophomore year aren't really given top responsibilities. It's really the later stages of their college career where they're given more, specifically, again, in a top-ranked program like UND. And that's what happened with Colin Adams. First 2 years, playing in the bottom 6, last 2 years, playing in the top 6, and he responded well with those minutes, putting up points. Last year, 34 points in 29 games for UND. Unbelievable. So I'm not going to say that this kid is a lock to make the NHL, but I'm really excited to see what he can do at the AHL level next year. He worked his way into a pro contract, and he deserves every penny of it, and I'm really looking forward to what he can see with the Bridgeport Islanders. Now again, these rankings aren't perfect, and they're not meant to be, this is it, they could only be this. No, there's certainly some things that can change with this ranking. The one thing I really want to account for is multi-year or multi-team years. So when you have guys move from team to team in one specific year, I want to account for that. What I'm doing right now in my rankings is just taking the largest sample size. So if a kid plays at the, let's say, SHL level and the Liga level, I want to be able to capture all of that. I don't want to just take, like, let's say he played 50 games at the Liga level and 20 games at the SHL level. Well, forget the SHL, let's just focus on Liga because that's the larger sample size. It kind of gives us a clearer picture of what that player did that year. Which is true to some extent, but we can't forget what they did at another level. That has to be included in it. So that's something that I'm going to be working on in these rankings going forward. What do you think about the rankings? Let me know in the comments what you think the Islanders' top 5 prospects should be. Thank you for following. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. And if you have, thank you, thank you, thank you.